Hey guys, Fox here, and today I'm going to be doing the Week 7 Power Rankings for the USFL 2022 season. This week, there wasn't really any change at the top, but the bottom has definitely shifted around a bit as a couple of the games have kind of changed the viewpoints of a couple weeks ago, and some very, very telling storylines have been continuing for some of these teams, which makes a lot of the top ones stay the same, and then the bottom ones change a bit. So without further ado, let's get started. Coming in at number 8, once again, are the Pittsburgh Maulers. Uh, it's hard to, look at them and be like, yeah, they're definitely the worst team again, just because of how long they've been down here. But they are. So let's just start with the fact that they lost. They lost by 10 points to the Breakers, and the most telling thing is the fact they got shut out in the first half again. So they didn't score anything in the first half. Breakers scored 10 and ended up putting up 16, but 13 of those were in what would be considered garbage time. Or 13 of those points. So, the Maulers kind of got pwned, really, because at the end of the third, they were down, basically, they were down 17-3. So, yeah. And especially in box score-wise, Vadley fell off a little bit. He only had, a 52 completion percentage for 200 yards, and he had 2 picks to 1 touchdown. And they didn't really have a single player that was that insane, which I think was their biggest fall, as they weren't able to really capitalize the same way they've usually been on something. They didn't turn the ball over. They didn't get turnovers. They just kind of got beat. And then as for the point differential and total points scored, they're still dead last in both stats. For how bad people want to say for most of the season the Michigan quarterback situation has been, they still have put up over 20 points more than the Panthers, than Pittsburgh, almost 30. And Pittsburgh has now been outscored by 50 more points than the second worst team. So it's just, I know point differential, total points scored aren't the be all, tell all, end all stats, but at the end of the day, it gets to the point where it's like, dude, your team is so bad. They are the worst team. I know they just beat the Gamblers a week ago, but when we get to the Gamblers, you'll see why I have them higher. Coming in at number 7 is going to be the Michigan Panthers. They fall down for a couple reasons. The first being the fact that they are no longer they're not the same as they usually are. To put it simply, the main reason they've always been able to avoid being the bottom 2 is usually because either A, they're leading the third down percentage and points allowed, or B, because they always lose a close game. This week, neither of them happened. They're still solid in third down percent, but they dropped to second. They dropped to 4th in points allowed. And in terms of the game that they did play, they got beat. They got beat by 16 points as they got shut out in the fourth quarter, and that pretty much ended the game for them. So, because of that, they're moving down, because it's just, if they're not going to be consistent with what they're good at, then I can't really keep them that high. Patterson's been looking a lot better as of late. I know he went 1-1 in touchdown to interception ratio, but overall he's been pretty solid the last couple weeks, which is good for them. But at the end of the day, the team falls down one spot since they're not leading either of those major stats anymore. But, hey, they're not the worst team in their division. At least there's that. Now, the highest mover is the Houston Gamblers, moving up 2 spots from 8 to 6. So to start off, something else that Michigan has fallen off of being positive in the point differential despite having an insanely bad record. Because now Houston has a 1 better point differential than them. And they've scored more points. And then in terms of their game and their other thing, they have the passing touchdown leader. They have the sack leader by Chris Autumn is awesome. Donald Payne still leads the league in tackles. Clay Thorson has the most points. They still are leading those stats. They still have the best punt return average, and they have the tie for the best turnover margin, which basically says that this team is legitimately a really, really solid team. They turn the ball over. They're able to score, but there's a couple issues on their team. And mainly it's the fact that they can't really win close games, at all, because Will Likely's also tied for the interception lead. But you look at this last game, it's the only one I'm going to show because I feel like at the end of the season I might just do a whole review on this team and maybe the Panthers too. They lost again at the literal end of the game. I talked about it in the last video for the review, but like, dude, they literally lost on a last second, no time left touchdown run. They lost by 1 point. But they are moving up because this was against the Generals. This was the second best team in football in the USFL. I don't think that's a shock to anyone. That team is awesome, and the Gamblers really did put up a fight. Clayton Thorson had a solid game, even though he wasn't the most insane yard-wise. He was solid enough for this team to be good. But aside from that, it's just you look at them, and it's just... I mean, what can you say? They have a kicker who's pretty good, but had a really bad day, and that was honestly what hurt them the most. Nick Vogel not being perfect, or like almost perfect like he usually is, as he's usually been like the best kicker, aside from Aubrey, that was what hurt them the most. Because he wasn't as good as he usually is, it basically just got it to a point where they just couldn't do it. So I guess it hurts for them, but at least they're moving up in the world, so I guess there's that. Coming in at number 5 is the Tampa Bay Bands. Tampa Bay Bands coming at 5, and I don't really think it should be a shock. They lost by 7. I made a whole video. You can click the link at the top right to watch it about how they lost that game at the end. I mean, Tom had a solid game, like a legit solid game, both through the air and through the ground. He almost had 400 combined yards, but they ended up losing to a team that is ranked higher than them and was. So, I mean, I don't really know if there's anything else to say. I mean, the only thing to say is that their points scored and point differential is also pretty bad. Like, for a team that's 3-3, they shouldn't be 6th in total points scored and 7th in point differential. But they're 3-3, they're 2 wins higher than any of the teams below them. But I think of all the teams that aren't the, 1-5 teams, it's pretty obvious that they are the worst team. So they're 5, they don't move down, which I guess is the good thing, but I mean, they are where they are, so yeah, I guess that's pretty much it. Coming in at number 4 is a team that beat them, the Philadelphia Stars. Stars are ahead of them. Their running game showed that they can legit, work. Colburn and Holland combined for and Cookus, I guess, for 197 yards, 3 touchdowns. They had a really solid overall, game between all 3 of them. Cookus did throw for 2 touchdowns, and I think the main thing is the fact that it's a good thing they're doing that, because I still don't know what the deal is with Brian Scott. It's great they have Channing Stribling, who has 4 interceptions, which is tied for the league lead, but it's just, you look at this team, and you're just thinking, dude, if this team had Brian Scott, because when he got hurt, he was pretty easy to say the only quarterback that really rivaled Jamar Smith in terms of being, the best quarterback in the league. But even without him, they won this game, and this was a major win for them. Because this game, thanks to the other 2 games where the team lost, this has put them 2 games ahead of their other teams in their division. And remember, the top 2 teams make the playoffs. So, I mean, and since there's no true home field, since it's all at a neutral place in Canton, at the end of the day, just making the playoffs is what matters the most, even though seeding matters a little bit, but not really, because you just play the team in your division. So you just have to make the playoffs. But now with this win, they're 2 games ahead of any other team in their division that's not number 1. So they have a really easy shot to the playoffs now because they won this game. They just have to not mess up. And so they're 4. They're a playoff team right now, and naturally the 4 playoff teams are who are in the top 4, which isn't guaranteed, but just what seems to happen. So yeah, the Stars, give them their credit, they're solid. But, I mean, if they can continue winning, that's all they need. Coming in at number 3, the team that I continuously don't really care about, because I just don't like them, I guess, for some reason, the New Orleans Breakers. I mean, dude, I'm just not a fan of the Breakers. I really am not. I get that Kyle Sloter and Jordan Ellis still lead the league in, passing yards and rushing yards. I know that this team in passing yards per game, and now points allowed and third down percentage, and their punt net average, I know they're still leading the league and stuff like that, but I still don't buy it. I think this team is a first round exit waiting to happen. I mean, they won a game with the quarterbacks throwing, their main quarterback throwing less than 100 yards. Really? I mean, I don't know. I might be just, being too harsh on the team just because I'm upset that some of their players won Player of the Week, or just that I think people overrated them for a while. But, I mean, they did play Pittsburgh. They played pretty much a cupcake, and they got their job done. So, I'll just say that. I mean, that's basically all I have to say for them. I know that, like, their points scored and point differential, they're solid. They're, like, third in points scored. Whereas Philly's ahead of them, surprisingly, and their point differential is second in the league. But I'm still not fully buying into them being this, full playoff team. Essentially, whenever they play the Bandits again, that game might end up being for the playoffs, and I guess we'll see what they're really made of then. Or, they can keep winning and make it not matter. So, we'll just wait and see. Now, the consistent team that is always second or third, it seems, the New Jersey Generals. Generals, yeah, they barely won, I know that. But at the end of the day, this team is still what they are. I mean, I already talked about it before, I'm going to just rehash it again. The only thing I really need to show is the fact that they won this game with DeAndre Johnson only having 4 passes because he got hurt. He was perfect, by the way, when he was playing. And then Luis Perez comes in, he had a 75 completion percentage, 1 touchdown, no picks. He's through checkdowns, which is what the offense wants. Because guess what? They ran the ball and they had 164 yards on the ground. I mean, I don't know what to say. I mean, the receiving yard leader now is also a New Jersey player. A team that just runs the balls, the leading receiver in the league is a guy who just runs the ball. I mean, there's not much to say about this team. They've been what they've been the entire year. They're not going to try and make you think they're anything else. They run the ball, and they run hard. And they'll do some passes, and maybe get a couple big plays off of it, but they just run the ball. And guess what? They've been running that formula to second best in the league, only because of who's number 1. Coming in at number 1 is the Stallions. Are you shocked? I mean, really, is anyone shocked? They did what no team really had done, and that's pwn the Panthers. Like, they beat them by 16. I mean, they did what they were supposed to do. They inexplicably were, like, playing Magoo for a bit, though, but, like, dude, J.M.R. Smith is so good. Even though he had 50 completion percentage, which isn't good, he still had 2 touchdowns. I think he's still, like, the best quarterback in the league. Well, if Brian Scott was healthy, he might be. But the new signing, Bo Scarborough, pretty much, showed why they ended up signing him. He had 104 yards and 16 carries to 6.5 average. That's really solid. The guy who leads the league in all-purpose yards is on their team, Victor Bolden Jr. He is like 967. And, I mean, they still have Brandon Aubrey, who, like, is still the best kicker in the league. And, I mean, I know he hasn't been automatic like he was at the beginning of the year, but he still leads the league in kicking points. It's just, dude, this team is so good. Points scored, they still lead the league by over 20. Point differential, they almost lead by 20. They are undefeated. They are 6-0. We might legitimately see an undefeated team this year, which is so funny. Because you know what? I just love the fact that I said it like the very beginning, that if they were to make the home, area a place where one of these teams played, they get a huge advantage. And every time you watch those games, there's no one there but the Birmingham games. There are fans there. It might not be sold out, but there are fans there. You can tell. And I guess that home field advantage is helping. So, unlike the other teams where I have to say, well, they're telling games in a couple weeks, the Stars are going to make the playoffs. Their division is weak. Well, it's not weak, it's just that compared to them, it's weak because they're the best team. But when the playoffs happen, that's when we'll see what this team 100% is. But from what we've seen, it's pretty obvious this team's the best in the USFL. It really is. They're undefeated. They're the best. So that'll do for the Week 7 power rankings. The bottom changed, the top not really. But, I mean, at this point, it's going to be a lot of small movement. I really don't see how any team could move some insane amount now that we're where we are in the season. We only got a few weeks left in the regular season, 4 actual regular weeks left before the playoffs. And at this point, it's pretty safe to say that the top 5 teams are the teams that are going to be competing for the playoffs. I think the Stars are a lock because of the division they're in, which makes the Generals a lock. And then between the Breakers and Bandits is going to be for the last spot. I mean, maybe the Stars do slip up and Michigan or Pittsburgh can surprise and make it. If Michigan go back to being in those close games and end up winning them, that'll help them out a lot. But for the most part, it really does look like it's going to be the Stallions, Generals, Stars, and then either the Breakers or Bandits. But you still got a few weeks left. If you enjoy this content and want to be notified as soon as I upload any videos, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell. And as always, have a great night.